Hi guys and gals, it's Pete, Mindwiseman's channel, aka Maverick Outdoors, and today is a nice, reasonably nice, bright, mild Monday morning. It's bank holiday weekend in the UK, which is a national holiday, and I set off yesterday on Sunday. It was a bit of a sort of impromptu arrangement. I had other things to do over this weekend. I was actually planning maybe setting off on Thursday or Friday and having a good 3 or 4 days out on the rivers. And I wanted to prospect coming out on the rivers in the canoe for the weekend, maybe sort of 3-4 days, but other things cropped up, and but I still had in the sidelines my kit ready and some real convenient food, so I wasn't have to cook much. So at least if it was an impromptu decision to come out in a great place like this, then I had everything ready and it was going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a mission with having to get loads of kit ready. So basically, if I did decide to come out, at least the latter part of this weekend, at least I had everything that was convenient just to sort of pack my bag, get out of Dodge, and get out on the waters, which I did sort of mid-afternoon yesterday on Sunday. Now the thing is, on a bank holiday weekend on the River Thames, there's loads of people out on the water. When it's sort of national holidays, unless you get to a sort of a bivvy camp, pitch, wild campsite, whatever, on the rivers early before everyone else, then sometimes it might not be vacant. So what I didn't want to do was go to my first choice place of put-in and then go to a different location to this and then find I couldn't actually pitch up my tarp or basher. So I had to make an executive decision based on economy of time, practicalities of what would have the least odds of me not being able to pitch. So I came to this backwater, which you've probably seen many times before. Featured it either a day out in the afternoon, knocking up some food just for a nice afternoon out, or even wild camping here as well a few times. This particular location has been cleared a little bit, access. I was here just over a year ago when I did Canoe with a wild camp view, which was the last time actually I was here with Safari Dog. And yeah, that was a bit sort of sentimental last night once I'd sort of settled, and remembering the last time that we were both here. So yeah, it's got sort of quite a significance, this location, but I was a little bit concerned because I know that the surrounding area has been cleared a little bit, and where I'm looking now, it's actually been cut down where all the nettles were, which sort of encased around this area, so sort of kept your privacy, so you didn't sort of get disturbed or anything like that. But it's been sort of cleared of recent months, especially since the latter part of last year, and I know that sometimes fishermen will use this spot, sort of maybe kids coming down for the afternoon. It's not a primal fishing spot, but I was also concerned thinking, what if I paddle all the way here? So I thought if I can't come here or pitch here, I'd have to go back downstream, return somewhere, and improvise somewhere else, or just pack up and go back home. So lucky enough this spot was vacant, so all good stuff at the moment. But I'll show you what I had to do just to sort of give myself that bit of privacy in case anyone was to come down here, say night fishermen or something like that. Really, since arriving here, there's been quite a lot of, even though it's a backwater, a really little small stream that's only navigable by non-motorised boats and vessels, mainly canoes. There's been quite a lot of life here since arriving last night. There was a load of swans that were coming down. There was even 2 swans coming from behind me, but I didn't realise there were swans. It sounded like someone was actually out for a night paddle, so I thought, all right, okay, I'll keep an eye out. And they must have been coming from some residents, actually some houses that are quite way back up there, and that's the only point of input to actually put the canoe. So there I was looking that way to see you know, who the paddlers were, and all of a sudden I saw these sort of 2 swan necks going by, and they were paddling quite fast. And then about, I suppose, half an hour later, there was some mature cygnets. They're young, sort of their grey fawn colour before they actually turn into mute white swans, and they were sort of like paddling down about half hour later. So and this is quite prominent, having actually swans and lots of wildlife along this area. I've also seen a number of kingfishers darting across the surface of the water a number of times. Their habitat flight path over the water is normally no more than about 2 to 3 foot maximum, but being a narrow stream, they really sort of stay low. So it's nice to see them welcoming to the day on a Monday morning. And then this morning, there's been some paddlers coming upstream this way towards, it's virtually sort of a bit of a dead end, about a further mile up, although the stream goes on for a good few miles, I think up to maybe 5-6 miles. It's not navigable because it's about sort of 2 inches deep and about 3 foot wide. So, but further up about half a mile from where I am, there's some residential premises which are right next to this riverbank. So someone actually came paddling down from that direction early this morning, and then someone obviously had been down that way, came off the main stream of the River Thames and actually paddled up this way. So there's been 2 lots of canoeists. The ones that went by from the residential house that overlooks the water have actually now just come back on their return journey. So from describing the niceties of being out on the waters, you know, you need to sort of have your spatial awareness to know who's around, especially if it's in close proximity to where the safety of your pitch is. Which will bring me on to some of the considerations that are worth thinking about, that I actually had to apply of arriving here last night and getting everything prepped and ready, setting up the basher as soon as possible, just in case there was a downpour of rain. There was a little bit of a shower, really misty little shower on arrival, but the weather forecast was supposed to be quite clement, so you know, that was going to be okay. But at the end of the day, you know, the weather can change. So personally, I always like to set up my shelter first before I do anything else. As you can see, I've slept in my softies, my jacket and trousers. I know I mention it every time, but if I don't, one day someone's going to say, oh, what do you sleep in? So it's just a sort of a reminder, confirmation as to some of the kit that I use. But actually last night I donned my trousers over my light green long length cargo cotton trousers. I wore my shorts yesterday and a vest. It was a lovely day, nice and warm. But later on in the evening, after I had a snack bite to eat, had the sandwich, started to get a bit chilly, so I donned the old longer trousers and put the softy trousers over the top last night when I settled, and my softy jacket literally over my fleece and t-shirt, as you can see here. So that was nice and warm. The day I don't say it, someone's going to say, well, how do you keep warm at night? Does it get cold? So this is just a confirmation to say this is what I tend to use all the time. And if it was even more inclement and colder, then I'd actually put myself wearing this in my 2-season Tropical Army sleeping bag for even more warmth. That's what I tend to use quite a lot of the time as my full sleep system when it's very cold. And plus as well, wearing the softy jacket and trousers, you can be easily mobilised during the night. So if I had to get up quickly, I'm not unzipping a sleeping bag and that sort of thing. Plus as well, very cold weather. What I'm wearing now inside the 2-season Tropical Army sleeping bag, which again you've seen that in previous videos, it tends, for me, I've found, gives more of a lofting effect, a thermal quality, because there's more layers, so you get more pockets of air in between those layers rather than maybe just one sleeping bag. That can be just as warm as well if you use an Arctic sleeping bag or a sort of 4-season very, very warm thermal one. But at the end of the day, it's down to personal choice and the activities you're doing. And once again, my pillow system, because it's different from the last time you saw it. This time I'm just using inflatable pillow, which I tend to use a lot, just on top of the folded up rucksack that I use to carry canoe kit, paddles, seat, booster, support seat underneath, all that sort of thing, all the sundries that are mainly for the canoe. But I just happen to have that nearby and not with the canoe, because the canoe's right next to me, which means the logistics of where you put your kit can be totally different compared to where you might leave some of your kit covered and protected by the canoe that might be sort of a few paces away. Less luxury this time. You see me using a black mat. This one is multi-mat, which I believe this company now have taken over, making them for the British military. But this is the 3/4 length, but that was nice and comfy. for the night. As long as it takes 3/4 of your body to sort of thermally off the ground, from your knees to your hips up to your head and shoulders, then that's the most important thing. You don't really lose much heat off your shins, ankles and feet as such if they're covered up, because there's not much contact with the floor. So really you want the main insulation and comfort anywhere from the knees upwards, right up to your head. Once I'd finished using the head torch last night, I wanted a bit more subdued light if I needed to have a bit of light switched on during the night. So I just hung the Cree head torch from one of the handles, which when this tarp doubles over as a stretcher, that's one of the handles. So have that internally so I can have the loops on the outside for the fixings. There's a lot of discussions whether the handle should be on the inside or outside, but if I have these on the outside then I've got no central loop to actually connect the centre of my tarp up there against the tree. Back to the head torch, it's got 3 selections on it: bright, medium and then flashing. I got it on the medium light, so it just sort of projected light down in a sort of conical shape like that underneath the tarp. And then I had this one that was kindly given to me by my good friend Steph when I met him at this, well, I've met him loads of times before, but we tallied up, we hadn't seen each other for a long time, so he gave me a couple of gifts, and this one is really good. So I had this attached with a little carabiner he gave me as well, which, just like the head torch, has got an adjustment, where as you can see it's got a sort of a telescopic part. If you pull it forwards you can see there's a gap there between my finger and thumb, and it directs a really sharp narrow beam at maybe 50-60 meters easily. So if you were sort of checking something out on a long distance, but you push it back and then it broadens the beam either side compared to a central one when you push it forward. So yeah, I kept that on my personal last night. But as I say, had that for overall basher light, just sort of nice subdued lighting if I did need to turn it on to get to any of this kit or any bits and pieces, or if anything was going on anywhere around here. So now I'm going to delve into my, what I call my kitchen kit bag, which has got all my food in it. Main food box here, as you saw last night, with a couple other bits and pieces that I took out. But in here, kitchen roll, container that had the kettle, 4 litres of water, 2 of these, and also a 2 litre bottle, which obviously carries a bit of the weight. Other containers, some fruit, the biscuits, tea making kit. Just in case there was any rain last night or a slight downpour, I could sit underneath my tarp, and on the inside corner I had my little setup, and where I'm actually sitting now, I had the seat in here, basically in the position that I'm sitting on the floor now. The little gas primus cooker was originally just there, but once I'd finished with it I just put it underneath the shelter of the little table. In a recent video I mentioned about when you sometimes have little bits of leftovers of the gas containers. You take a full one with you because you know you want it to last for a good few days, and there's always a little bit left over. So what I did the same objective over the past 24 hours. I brought this one, it's now empty, had a little bit, it did what I needed yesterday. It did what I needed yesterday late afternoon and last night when I made a brew and of course cooked the vegetables and then heated up the rest of the curry dish. I've now got this left over. There must have been, I think it's just about enough to get a couple of brews out of that, and set up now ready to make a coffee. And then in a box I've got a little portion of what I prepped up at home, which is like granola, nutty granola, bit like me, nutty, nutty granola outdoors, literally. But I also added some extra Brazil nuts, some cashew nuts in there, and some pecans. That was the basis to it in the actual pre-pack, but you can see I've got it in a seal bag, just a hand seal bag, zip bag. But I also put a couple of teaspoons of maple syrup in there. You can see there's a sort of slight brown tinge to it. You can see a snack bar in there, salt and pepper if I needed it, the oil that cooked up the vegetables, there's a little bit left in there, tomato sauce if ever I want to sort of season it with anything, But here, this is just really like a tinned MRE as far as I'm concerned. No cooking, just butter beans and tomato sauce. Believe me, these aren't like your normal plain butter beans that come in like a brine. These are really nice, really nice. They're the next best thing to a good quality large baked beans. If you like baked beans, you definitely like these. Then basically this eats straight from the tin. It's peppers with a sort of a pork and veal mince filling wrapped, you can see the little picture there, in tomato sauce. So basically that's a non-cooking meal. I can eat that cold. I brought the 40ml, just over 40ml of fresh milk, which I wrapped in the foil, which just sort of like contributed to keeping it cool. And of course, as you saw previously, that was over the top to protect the lid. But there's a good amount left in there. There's about enough for a brew in there. I've got a couple of all-in-one coffees which have already got the sort of cream of milk added to it, so I'll probably be having that actually with my breakfast granola. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to pour the majority of the milk in there, mix it around with a spoon and just leave it to soak so it softens for a little while. So this is my non-cooked breakfast, plenty of calories, get me going for the day. This eat cold meal later on, sitting on a riverbank. So the whole objective of coming out for the 24 hours, enjoying this sort of Sunday coming into Bank Holiday Monday, was basically just to get simple stuff, nothing elaborate, just stuff that I didn't have to plan. It wasn't a mission to get together, and just made it really simple. So the only thing I had to cook was the meal last night, and everything else now is just either using the Primus. So the whole event kills two birds with one stone really, using the gas containers to finish those off, not having to make up anything cooking wise. That's being eaten cold. Non-cooked, that's non-cooked. All light and simple, easy stuff in a bag, job done. Inside the lid of the milk container there's a white O-ring, as you can see, that sort of seals, goes round the edge, so when that goes on top and then the clips off, it secures the liquid in the container. I've got a smaller one of these containers which takes about, I think it's about just over 300ml of liquid, but it's got a screw cap. You've seen me use it before, but it's got a screw cap with the O-ring. So a screw cap tends to fasten easier, but with these sort of clip things it can maybe just move a bit, and Murphy's Law would have it in your bag, it's going to leak. So what I've got here is I just double sealed it with some cling film over the top, so that sort of made it more of a seal before putting this lid on. So it's just a handy thing to know if you've got containers that might be prone to leaking, depending on how they're being stored or transit moved around. So what I'm going to do now is wait for that to soften a little bit. Still want a bit of crunchiness, but I can then eat it out of the Ziploc bag. It's now breakfast time, bring it on. Okay, let's talk about some of the bits and pieces I brought for this 24-hour little excursion. on this impromptu last minute arrangement to come out without any real big mission, although you might look at the kit and bits and pieces I've got and think, well, you know, you're talking about being minimalist, or with the attitude of actually coming out at the drop of a hat and being able to come out for this 24 hours. Yeah, I could have used the canteen BCB type mug, put a litre water bottle in that and just had that, cooked out of it, eaten out of it, drunk out of the BCB cup, or again sort of canteen cup with folding handle. Could have used the Hexi stove, which I always bring with me anyway as backup, but obviously I brought the things that I brought because I could and I wanted to. So my old faithful bag, I've had this for many years, bought it especially to go in the canoe. It's got sort of a reinforced base to it, it's really sturdy, although the seams maybe aren't waterproof. The actual material, it hasn't withered or fatigued or anything, and that's waterproof. In the little zipper pouch that's fixed to the inside, I've just got all sundries in there. My lead, my RAV power lantern, and also charger, which I didn't use as a lantern this weekend, but I did just sort of top up my phone as I uploaded a few pictures to Instagram and Facebook as to what I was getting up to, because people are really interested. And the leads in there with many other things, rubberized glue, my keys, things that I will always have in that bag, especially when I'm coming out in the canoe. But all the stuff that fitted in the main section of the bag is here. Now you might think, crumbs, that's enough for a month. But, you know, let's look at it logically. There's a fire guard, there's the 2 gas containers I was saying that were partially, only had a little bit left, so I've used those up. Kettles in there, mess tin that I was able to cook effectively the vegetables and then moved it all over with the rice and then heated up the pre-cooked curry. The food box there, then I've got the biscuits and the brew kit. The sandwiches were in that box there, tin of fruit, paper kitchen towel, the camping gas, butane gas container attachment, millbank bag just in case there's any problems and I did actually need extra water. I can always fill it up with a container, cup, whatever, fill it up with water and then drain it, let it drain kettle and boil it up. So I've always got the millbank bag for backup every time I go out, even if I'm on terra firma, woodland, bushcrafting, anything. And then 2 1-litre bottles and the 2-litre bottle, which I've still got water left in that rectangular one. So yeah, I've still got some brew left over, I've still got some biscuits left over. Better to have more than not enough, and wish you'd brought more. And I've got 2 cartons of drink. I'm not going to knock up a brew, I'm not going to spark that back up, because it's going to be easier to pack that away once I strike down camp and then just leave it in the bag without having to get it out again. Hence sticking with the fruit juice, and also it's just under a litre stainless steel flip top straw. The straw actually goes through the lid right down inside, and I'm very grateful for this, because out of the lots of gifts that we get from friends and relatives when they don't know what to get us, they normally focus on things that you're interested in. So obviously it's outdoors activities, so yeah, that's a really great bottle, and I've tended to use that more. Well, actually it's replaced using one of those 1-litre bottles, which I would put in the carry bags that can actually then fit on your back. But this is far more practical. Just flip the straw open, suck it out, stick it back on the carabiner, and that simple quick drinking system is much easier for me than actually having to unscrew the cap of the bottle and moving that around. What I've done is I've actually lost some of these items, but now I've finished with some of these items, I'm putting this box. So there's a sandwich box going in the mess tin, other bits and bobs in there, so that just takes up the 1 box space, and that will go in the base of the bag. And then the food and drink that I'll be consuming later on this afternoon, I'll leave on top of the rucksack, so it's easy access to get to them just by opening the lid of the bag. Okay, just an aspect of this side pouch, what I tend to keep in there at all times is my versatile fire lighting kit, different ways of lighting fires. My small little binoculars, I can actually hang that around my neck if I want, or even loop it onto a belt loop, so it's actually on my person. And this has also got a belt loop on the back if I don't want to put it in my pocket. My Leatherman Sidekick multi-tool, I normally keep that on me, even daytime EDC. just a little utility strap I've got here. Easy access fire steel, tin opener, torch and whistle, always. Hexi stove, I had actually considered maybe knocking up a brew, as you saw when I did the most recent solo wild camp in the Canoe on the rivers. I actually use this whilst also using the butane gas cooker, but again this is always backup. I'll always have with me in case of failure of anything. My RAV lantern, charger, torch and fishing line for alert alarm around the perimeter of your camp and pitch. So the fire lighting kit in the little box is waterproof. It's got a seal where the lid closes. One clip either end, two clips at the side. That will go in the base of that pouch. It's like building bricks really, sort of put the main things on the base so that you actually get economy of space. So the fire lighting box kit and the binoculars are down on the side. Next goes in my Leatherman multi-tool. So everything's now in place, and the final thing is when I dismantle it is my alarm system, a little unit which has got the alarm built into it, which will fit in there, then that's zipped up. This other pouch on the other side, it can vary what I put in there, sort of tripods for the camera, little attachments, things like that, just any extra little sundries, some extra bits of cotton wool, again just for tinder, so if it can fit in there and it's not weighty and bulky, then that's my sort of spare utility pouch that can vary depending on where and when I go somewhere. So the stick table is dismounted with the two legs clipped in, and then the wind guard for the butane gas cooker to its side, and that's going to go down the back of the bag. So you can just about see the base of the bag with a stick table behind, empty water bottle to the side, food container with other bits and pieces, empty containers that are not going to be used, a container at the front, biscuit container, empty water bottle, then everything else will go on. The stove attachment I normally put in one of the side pouches as well. There's the next layer, two gas containers on their side, rather than actually laying them flat. It sort of fits in, so it's sort of fitting in sort of the round peg and the round hole, square peg and the square hole type of effect. Easy access for the spoon in that, again with easy access at the top to the food when I eventually want it later on. Kitchen roll, cartons of drink, and it's virtually all in there. Final thing to go in, 2 litre bottle which I topped up some of my easy access drink bottles. There's nearly a litre in there. There's about a litre left here, because when you're sort of out in this sort of weather, paddling, being very active during the and on a warm sunny day you're considering doing activity during that day outdoors, then you need to be hydrated. So that's why I brought virtually 5 litres. I already had a litre in that purple bottle attached to the side of the rucksack, then the 2 1 litre bottles, and then the single 2 litre bottle. And I didn't need it to sort of cook any food or anything, it was mainly to make a brew and maybe rinse out the cup or the mess tin with a bit of water. I fully appreciate that you can put all your kit, your food, bits and bobs straight in the bag and not have to put them in boxes, but the lightweightness of the boxes that I've used is so convenient. Just take one unit out, you know what you've got in it, take another unit out, rather than sort of just having a mishmash of stuff in a bag, and if it drops to the bottom then you've got to move something else around. So I prefer to use the box system because it makes it more practical. Plus as well, if you have to leave it outside the bag and it's not totally sealed like a tin, something like that, or a sealed packet, but it's sort of exposed, then at least keeping it in the box protects it against creepy crawlies and from it actually perishing and that sort of thing. So that's why I prefer to use boxes, because for me it's much more practical, especially being on the waters as well. It's a totally different game. Okay, the 100 litre dry bag. I've very seldom had this full, although when I was out for about 5 days a few years back, it was about nearly 2/3, 3/4 full. But on average it's about 1/3 to half full. But this is everything. Softy jacket, softy trousers, much more space would be taken up if you had a bigger sleeping bag. Inflatable pillow, the inflatable mattress, some wet wipes, mozzie wipes, a sweat towel for perspiring. Again, if you're active, you're going to be perspiring. The last thing you want, and I don't want to wear a headband, but the last thing you want is perspiration sort of running down into your eyes, so always keep that actually either in the back seat, my canoe seat pouch, or just on top of the rucksack, easy access. And then first aid kit, wash kit with a few sundries in there, micro fibre towel, waterproof jacket with hat and waterproof trousers, lightweight. Another gift given to me, I don't know, about a year ago, it might have been for Christmas or birthday, from my son, a dry bag. So what I tend to do is I use this one to put my clothes in, so they're separate. The multi-use buff, which can be used as a scarf, can double it over so it's a cap, or as I was wearing it last night, and also a light screen to go over your eyes. Clean vest I'll be putting on today because that one got very sweaty under that personal flotation device vest. So if you want to sit around with sweaty clothes that dry out on a sunny day, then that's great. But for me personally, if that vest is stuck to my back, I want to get it off me as soon as possible and then don on a dry one. But actually, once I've done a sort of a wet wipe over, once I'd set up the camp and the basher, I just put this clean t-shirt on, and there's the green trousers and there's the fleece. I've also got another smaller little dry bag, yet another gift, and that was from V, my good friend Wild Soul V. Got this for Christmas when we did a bit of a meet up, a few of us, and exchanging gifts and what have you, and amongst other bits and pieces you gave me was this. So I use this for sort of like socks, underwear, that sort of thing. There's a lot of water out there, and if your clothing gets wet you want to put some dry ones on, so it's always handy just to have but especially a pair of socks, because if you tread in the water or you misstep or something like that, it's only happened to me twice in about 10 years, but if it happens and you've got soaking wet socks, there's nothing worse than wearing wet socks and not having a dry pair to replace them, so hence the socks in there. And one final thing before I pack away things into the base of the large dry bag, things that I won't need access to for the rest of the day, they'll go in the base. Just a quick recap on the inflatable mat. I mentioned it in one of the last videos, but what I do, rather than have the valve sticking out on this corner here, so it comes out and it's just under there, you can roll it into the centre, but I prefer to, obviously you can't really, because then you'll roll in the valve and it won't deflate, so obviously you've got to do it from the foot end, roll it up till you get to here. But what I do is I get a nice sturdy bit so it doesn't fatigue the valve, and you can imagine where it's folded over, the actual valve is underneath there, rather than having it here where it could snag. So that's just an addition I do when I'm packing away my inflatable mat. Okay, so that's a dry bag packed, and I'm going to leave the wet wipes, cleaning wet wipes, mozzie wipes and my perspiration towel out and actually put on the top of the other rucksack, so I've got easy access if I want to freshen up, especially when I get to put in and then I've got to take out ready for the journey home. I just want easy access, just to have a bit of a freshen up before that drive. Fantastic Sunday afternoon, nice and sunny. Really worthwhile actually making the effort to actually come out here, this impromptu visit. Since the last time I was here was just over a year ago, and I was here with my faithful companion safari dog Akasha, but sadly no longer with me. But we came here and I did a bit of respite for her. That was the last time I actually wild camped actually on this spot, but I've been here a few times before just for a casual sort of lunch on the side of the bank. Well, I'll explain a little bit about the setup, a little bit different to last time, and also the aspects of actually easy access from the public land or the public right of way for people that could have actually got down onto this part of the bank. The majority of times I've been to this little bit of riverbank, this has all been overgrown, but recently a path was actually cut down all through the nettles, which are all as high as this, really bushy. But arriving here yesterday, this little bit of cut down path led all the way through down to this bank, with a few bits of stick similar to this stuck in the ground. So obviously we're a fishing rod holder, and two of them were exactly along the edge of this bank, so obviously someone's come down. Heard a few heavy splashes in there last night, which must have been fish anything from £1–2 pound upwards. So I was also anticipating, not necessarily there'd be any people sort of fishing here, but someone else might have been here over the bank holiday weekend that sussed out some of this area and thought, oh yeah, I'll pitch up there, and had the same idea as me. Which tends to be the problem if you actually want a place for yourself. You know, during the summer season and obviously during summer holidays and national holidays, people get out on the waters, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's really great. But obviously, if you're getting up ready to go out and you go to get to your pitch and someone else is there, then it totally sort of scuppers the whole plan. So what I did, I got some dead shrubbery from over there and also some from over here. Sort of block that in a little bit, although the bank comes down and you actually, if you don't know what you're doing, you're actually going to fall in just there, so it's not really an access point. But as you can see, I mean, it's nothing super structural, it's just sort of a barrier. A couple of people walked down here a bit earlier on and sort of stopped about halfway, obviously saw I was here and could understand why all that shrubbery was placed. Respecting that someone's here, obviously respecting their privacy, just as I would if I saw someone in the same sort of situation, I would leave them to it. Just down there, there's a family with 2 canoes. 2 young children are paddling in front, and then the mum and dad are behind in another canoe. And they came from way up there. They just passed by. The parents were in front this time, diligently looking behind with the 2 kids paddling behind. And they sort of stopped by and said, "Oh, sorry, we're invading your privacy." It was like, no, not at all. That sort of shows the politeness you can get from people sometimes. And it was like, no, not at all. So they stopped for a moment, just had a brief chat, and I said, you know, do you live nearby? And they said, no, it's a village about a couple of miles up the road, basically. But they're lucky enough to actually overlook this part of the stream, which is actually smaller and more ornate, a couple of miles further up. So, yeah, lucky them. You can get the potential marauding person coming down here, nosing around, seeing what you're up to. Oh yeah, what's this bloke doing? He's got a canoe, got a tarp bash or whatever they call them. Why don't he get a tent? It's no different really from me being a canoeist. If I pass fishermen, people fishing on the banks, I'll try and steer away from them, acknowledge that they're there, and I'm doing the best I can to sort of make sure I'm not going anywhere near their swim, but obviously it's inevitable. There could be some disturbance, especially if you've got a fisherman on the main stretch of the Thames with all the kit, you know, been out there overnight, bivvying on the riverbank, doing a lot of real sort of dedicated fishing, and a massive great launch goes by. It's just the nature of the beast being on the water. If I'd have arrived here yesterday and there'd been some people fishing, I'd have acknowledged them, been polite, nodded, and just sort of paddled by. So the majority of people when you're out on the waters do respect your space. Just common courtesy really, that's what it boils down to. So around this area somewhere I had my trip cord connected to my alarm system, which for obvious reasons I'm not going to describe it or show where the location was or how I actually put it together. Suffice to say there's a 2-in-1 here, which is like a hanging line, just sort of like hang anything to dry or air, but also it's not a deterrent obviously, but someone's got to get their attention to actually see that they're walking into this and maybe distract them that they're actually walking onto or into something else. And again, that's just simple personal safety, you know, your own personal space. You don't know who's around different times of day, especially at night, and I was here all last night, so you know, it does have public access around certain areas. And if you've got certain people that might be up to no good, which can happen, not all the time, but it can happen, it's just being one step ahead and for your own personal safety. Okay, the Basher brief. This end, along the ridge line. Oh, just a quick addition here. I haven't actually featured it for a long time, but hopefully you can just about see it. But you can see where it's slightly discoloured along here, right along the ridge line. It's where I waterproofed it with a silicone and spirit solution and sort of painted it on. And I did that, it must have been about a good 3 years ago now, and I haven't had any problems with it at all. Really nice and pliable, flexible, and it hasn't fatigued or anything. So that was a good job done and served its purpose. One of the swans that came back up with its partner and its cygnets early this morning at daybreak, so they must have gone the direction the swan's going at the moment. And late last night, that must have been one of the ones that was paddling 20,000 to the dozen. That sounded like someone was in a kayak paddling the direction that swan's just come. But it had zoomed off down there with its other one And as I say, half hour later, along came the sort of grey, nearly mature cygnets. But then at daybreak, when I was sort of woke up a little bit, I was up for a little while, just had a drink of water, they actually came back. It must have been about 6 o'clock in the morning, so it's quite nice seeing them. So I might see them again floating by a bit later on. Back to the basher. Okay, this is one of the sectional poles. Again, I've featured these before. These are about 12 inches long now. I cut them to size. I got 8 sections and they were 18 inches each. So 4 times 18 is 6 foot. So one of the poles in 4 sections was 6 foot. But I decided that 18 inches was a little bit too long. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's nearly 5 foot high. So I could get a fall for any water, if there was any from rain, down to this basher pole, telescopic, which I only brought one. Specifically because I had an idea how I was going to set up this configuration. And as this sectional pole stands, obviously if this is 5, I've got 3 left in the shelter kit bag there. So it's 5 there, 3 left in the bag, which obviously aren't long enough to use. So the other end of the rig, this contraption, which actually came as seen, it was actually silver, but I just wrapped some brown tape around it just to get rid of some of the reflection. Obviously some of it's worn off. But there are 6 sections to this, and this is how it actually came. I'm not sure what it was actually for, because it didn't have a fixing spike at the top. But that one, again for the same principle, to stick in the pouch of your rucksack so it's not too long. I actually got off eBay, I think it was about, I don't know, I've got it, I think it was about £7.50. I was the only person doing the auction and bidding for it, and I think it was £5 and £2.50 post. So I got that. So I got that actually quite a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. So having a good idea of how I was going to do the config, I just brought the right amount of uprights, because obviously I knew I wasn't going to have access to get wood and make basher poles from bits of lying down wood or anything I could find in the undergrowth, rather than actually cutting something down and then using the paddle, which obviously is a bit lower this end than that end, because that's going to be a main access to get in and out, besides sort of to the river, having a nice view, so nothing's blocking that if I did need to get to the edge for water or something from my seated position. So it doesn't matter if this was a bit lower, but this is the longer one of the paddles disconnected. The other one's a bit shorter because obviously it's got the insert, whereas that actually fits into the tubular part, so this is just a little bit longer. So again, I've featured this before, but the config is slightly different, hence highlighting some of it in this video. But there's a tent peg spiked through the eyelet of the basher going into the paddle, and then of course that's tautness for the cord to come right down and be fixed in the ground there. So the peg has got to be in a really good angle to get the leverage so it doesn't pull out. If it's upright, as you know, it's just going to come straight out. So this one especially, so the bank was just about sort of solid enough and dry enough. You get to know different types of terrains when you're out in the water, so if it was like wet weather near the autumn and winter and I was pitching up, it might not be as solid, because obviously the surface of the ground nearer to the water, stating the obvious really, but sometimes people don't think of it. They think, oh well, they come here another time when the weather's been really wet and wonder why they don't actually get a fix in. But what I would have done is maybe got a stick and dug that right into the ground and linked it all the way down, but actually sort of dug a stick, a really nice long one, in the ground at a slight angle, so it kept the support. Again, it didn't come out, the leverage was nice and strong, but I could get away with a tent peg, ground peg. And keeping the centre of the ridge in a good fixing via the upstanding tree, so that gives it solidity right along this ridge line rather than there's no sag. And it also helps when you take off these corners as well, it gives more solidity by having that sort of relatively horizontal. Last time I pitched this basher when I was here, when I was with Safari Dog and we were here overnight, the whole of the basher was slightly lower and the bottom edge here was actually fixed to the ground. So because I wanted the overall elevation a little bit higher and spacious roof-wise underneath, sitting, getting up off the chair and being able to walk out from underneath the tarp easily, I decided to bring this ridgeline up higher, hence using both of the different types of basher poles each end, the sectional ones, so it could be nice and high, then of course the central point as well. And because the canoe is behind that tree, I decided to utilise the versatility of the canoe and hook the bungee into one of the canoe's eyelets, which is a fixing point, and also it takes the tug rope. Shortened the bungee cord, gave it enough tension, then hooked it into the eyelet of the tarp and did the same the other end. As you can see quite easily, from there all the way down into there. No fixing in the centre there to the ground, because the rigidity of it being pulled against the tree, obviously it goes in a little bit, it sort of comes in. So I haven't really lost any space, because as long as I had the space virtually from the ridge down, it meant that sort of, if this makes sense, this was nearly my floor space. And this side wasn't really a sort of part of the living quarters as such, it was just part of the structure, and also screened me off from the public access land on the other side. Now, I could have fixed these bungees, or with a bit of paracord, which I've got here, always have this attached to all the loops of the tarp, so it's always ready to go up and be fixed. But just for convenience, it's 50-50. Sometimes I'll use this, sometimes I'll use the bungee cords, depending on practicality and time-wise. But this hook, instead of it being on the eyelet of the canoe, could have actually been, if it was the paracord, could have gone down into the ground, and I could have pegged it into the ground. But it would have been faffing around, so it was more easier to adjust the bungee cord, hook it into that eyelet, hook it into that eyelet, and it does exactly the same job as if I'd ground fixed it. And the canoe is centrally resting on the tree, away from harm's way. Not necessarily harm's way, but just for safety and security really. I could have left it there overnight and connected that up to the alarm system as well, but you know, it's just a lot of faffing around. Then it's far more secure and far less concerns. Okay, so I've got the canoe ready to put in. Now, something I've just done is always a good idea, that when the canoe's been left for half a day to at least a day, and there's been temperature changes, whether the temperature rises or lowers, as it's been since the canoe's been somewhat exposed to the sun and the warmth of today, much warmer than yesterday. It was cool last night, so air shrinks when it gets colder, so the pressure would have reduced. But I just double checked with the pump, unscrewed the caps on all three chambers, the removable floor chamber, valve, and also either side chamber, and checked the valve pressures, and they're just about as what I would have expected them to be in this temperature. They haven't really changed since yesterday, albeit that I've let a little bit of air out because it's probably expanded more than yesterday because of today's warmth. So again, these are things that you just need to consider, just general maintenance. It's nothing sort of over the top, it's just general running of an inflatable canoe. Which now brings me to this little beauty. Polystyrene homemade bolster for the seat, 3 inches high, made out of sheets of polystyrene. You can just about see the join where it's sort of butted together, where my finger is there. There's one bit, there's another bit, there's another bit, and taped them together with gaffer tape. And this will fit under the seat, so it's more ergonomically shaped for when you're paddling. Which basically means when you place it under the seat, it raises the hip and knee level just that much, so it's much more comfortable to paddle. Now the thicknesses in the polystyrene varied from 50mm to I think it was 100mm or 25, and I wanted in between. 50mm is 2 inches, too low. 100mm is just a little bit too high, sort of 4 inches for me anyway. So I bought the sheets of 25mm each thickness, and I think there was something like, no, it's actually one sheet, that's right, one sheet, and it was about 1.4 metres by 1.2 metres by 2.4. And I was able to make 4 of those, because obviously 2 seats in either of the canoes, Mark 1 and this one Mark 2. I did look around for things that maybe I could use, like kneeling mats, using a few of those, but they weren't the right size. They wouldn't have been a good position. They wouldn't have been the right size or shape So I thought, well, if I tailor make them myself, and I think the sheet of polystyrene came under £10. So it was cutting 3 pieces per block, so that was 12 pieces divided by 4, that's 3 blocks, that's one of them there, and wrapping them with really good but cheapo gaffer tape. So I suppose the whole lot came to about £12. So each of those blocks, £3 each, and they're made specifically to size. So that's if that's any help or assistance to anybody, go to your DIY, get some polystyrene and make some blocks to raise the ergonomic effect of paddling in a supportive canoe seat. So the black rucksack that carries all the canoe kit and sometimes my shelter kit, depending on what point of transit, depends actually what's in it. I've got the food bag and the separate zipper bag which holds all my kit, which I'll show you in a moment. So if you imagine that rucksack, which is actually made for a supboard stand-up paddleboard, but the Mark 1 that this bag came with was just a little bit too big. With a squeeze it could have gone in, but it was far too heavy and I didn't like the practicality of it, but it's still really useful for actually transiting. So if you imagine my hand as the rucksack upstanding, the flattened seat with the strap sort of tied around it to keep it compact, and the bolster block are together, sandwiched together. Back to imagining the bag, slide down the back, and then the seat, the fold-up seat, also goes in the back of it. Down the side, the high pressure pump, the pump tube and the repair kit sit mat, and you can see they're the 2 fins, which I haven't used this weekend. The fins are great, they're the longest size of their type. They're just over 8 inches, and one at the front and one at the back. Really track if you're being broadsided with the wind. But if if you've got no real resistance against anything and you need to manoeuvre easier, of course there's less resistance when you haven't got the fins. But consider, I want the practicality and the simplicity of just laying the canoe down on its underhull, and when you're landing the canoe like I did and brought it onto this bank and put it behind the tree, when you're sort of bringing it on or just sort of shooting it onto the ground, my personal technique and point of view is to the least amount of abrasion as possible. I mean, it's really rugged, the floor is rugged underneath, but just a little bit of pulling, so there's a little bit of friction, but then I want to lift it up. So it's just sort of pros and cons for different situations. So I didn't use the fins, although I have done, but I didn't want to use them for today. But at least they're there, always keep them in the kit bag. So you can see I've now struck down camp. Canoe's ready to be loaded. In the, let's call it the canoe kit rucksack, I've got my dry bag, which I showed you with all the stuff packed in it. The camo 100 litre all rolled up inside. The pump, the seat at the back, basher pole wrapped in a green ground sheet to protect the spine. Not as a problem, but you know, better safe than sorry. A few other bits of tools, the fins, the repair kit. Sit mat that goes on top of the folding seat, and repair kit. What else we got? Duct tape and this rag that I use to dry the canoe. As you can see at the stern, it's got a drain plug. So what I do, once I've unpacked it and it's literally empty, obviously the floor's still in there, just the canoe and the floor itself, I get the bow and I start to tip it up, and I try to rest it on something, either against a wall or the wall of a bridge or a kit bag, so the water then starts to run down and go into that drain hole. Since striking down camp and what have you, I've just put on this lightweight breathable, I think it's British Army issue, really lightweight. It sort of wicks the fluid, sort of perspiration from your body, so I've just put this on, as you can see, to protect from the sunlight and the warmth. It's really thirsty work, so you know, good job I brought all the fluids, because dehydration in this sort of weather can make you not function with doing something physical, so sort of paddling, whatever physical activities you do. So I just got a carton of fruit drink to wet my palate. and then I'll have some water. Got about a litre of water left, another one of these, and this will keep me going for carbohydrates to keep me going physically, because you can burn up to about sort of 300 to 400 calories paddling for about a mile. So you burn off a lot of calories, you're shedding a lot of perspiration, so you know it's really important to keep hydrated. So cheers. And the problem being is dehydration and actually getting thirsty is your body telling you that the biochemistry is starting to get a bit unbalanced and getting the blood sugars into your body to keep you going. So it's really important to keep hydrated, especially in warm weather, doing physical exertion, physical activity in general. Otherwise it can affect your performance and reduce it quite significantly. And I actually covered a lot of this in one of the videos I did with hydration and carbohydrate intake, because obviously from my knowledge as a personal trainer for 20 years, I just imparted some really basic information to help people with physical endurance with their activities, because a lot of us do stuff outdoors. So it's important to know that hydration is not just sort of drinking to stop thirst, but what it actually does to the body and how it can actually break down the fueling system. So if you've not seen it or you're interested in that sort of subject, check it out. The video, it's only a short video, about 12 minutes long. It was after the Brecon Beacons trek I did with Mountain Goat Dave. I think it was May last year, bank holiday May 2015. Then I did a little bit of it, and then I actually separated it and made it two separate videos, one to do with hydration and one to do with carbohydrate intake for physical activity to keep you going. So check it out if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you haven't seen it before. So what I will do in the near future is a separate video relative to emptying the canoe, draining it of water, and then giving it a wipe down. And the way that I deflate the canoe, there's a particular sort of routine and set system that I do so that the D-rings, as you fold the canoe over each time, it doesn't fold on each of the D-rings. So they're actually in the flat bit and the fold is in between. So there is a specific sort of technique and method to actually doing it rather than just rolling it up, because it's much better practice to actually have the least amount of pressure on any of the folds. I mean, it's just logic really, but for some people they might just need a little bit of assistance and coaching on it, so I will be doing a video on that. And it will probably be round about the time when I get confirmation that I can individually order one-off canoes one at a time, and it's going to be, we think, a prospect over about 3 weeks. So from when the canoe is paid for and ordered, you can expect to get it manufactured, all handmade individually to you, and then delivered within about 3 weeks. And it's no real difference. And so if you wanted another bit of kit made, like a bushcraft knife, where maybe you might have to wait months and months until you can actually receive it. But this, I'm trying to work it, final few little bits of negotiation, whereby there'll be an update on the point of sale and the actual ordering process. So I've cleared away that shrubbery, so the cleared pathway is now made accessible. The ground is left as I found it, and I'm off down there. So thanks for spending time with us watching this video, a bit of a sort of commemoration really. Return to Canoe with a wild camp view, and just a few spec on some of the kit, maybe a bit more expansive than what I've covered before. Some of it is similar, but sometimes it changes depending on the circumstances. But I think, you know, with people that think about, you know, canoeing or just trekking out and about, needs to be sort of minimal kit, lightweight and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I agree to a point, but everything is relative to what you need. So I could have come out with, say, the BCB mug, canteen of water, could have filtered the water out of the river, had to treat it, all that sort of thing, but I brought everything that I needed to contend with being out for 24 hours. Stuff that I know I'm going to use from using it before, and of course having the canoe, it's just an easier mode of transit to actually take your stuff. But you'll notice I didn't have my Old Faithful, the 2-burner stove, which I've been using a lot, but of course I wasn't actually cooking a lot, so I didn't need it, hence bringing the leftover butane gas containers. So that did the job. So out of the 4 meals, the sandwiches, the curry I did last night with the fresh prepped vegetables at home, and then cooking it with a pre-made meal, the rice and the curry. And then of course this morning, the granola that I sort of made myself, then knocked out with the milk, so there was no cooking with that. And then also the tin stuff that I've got with the butter beans and the stuffed peppers in the flat oval type tin food. So there was hardly any cooking and everything was really convenient. So thanks for watching. As always, really appreciate your interest, and I hope you deemed some sort of interest from this video with maybe new bits of information that you hadn't thought of before. And until the next time, I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers. Take care.